Not me.
It's live, yeah.
Is that your screen or is that Ria? Or maybe it's just the.
We are live, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. Everybody, good afternoon. It's a delight to have all of you join in at one of the webinars which we believe holds a key importance in the way offshoring is evolving as of 2026. My name is Omkar Kandalkame. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer over here at Supervity AI. And along with me, there is a very, very dear colleague and a great friend, Utsa Khare, our head of growth, who's joined us where we, over the next 30 minutes or so, are going to be putting forward a new mechanism on how AI shoring has the potential to really evolve from how traditional BPO models work. So over to you, Utsa, to give a quick brief introduction, and we can start diving into this.
Great. Thanks, Omkar. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I mean, this is a space which is seeing a lot of traction, especially in the GCC space in India, globally as well. You yourself you've been to World Economic Forum at Davos, and where we signed the landmark deal, setting up world's first AI GCC. So that's a space where we see a strategic focus for us, and that's something that we want to talk about in the next 30 minutes. So looking forward to having that conversation with you.
Great, lovely. So, before we dive in, let's set some context. Between the two of us, you said we've spent a lot of time, working with enterprises, helping them operationally transform themselves, be it Fortune 500 financial firms to large global manufacturing enterprises to even large government agencies, something what you referred right now, what we are doing at Maharashtra state government, right? We've seen what works, we've seen what doesn't work, and we've increasingly been able to have very specific conversations with CFOs, CEOs, tower heads, share services leaders. And that conversation normally starts off with something like, hey, our BPO costs went up by 18%, 20% last year. Our volumes were flat, and somehow we still had quality issues. If you're agreeing with this right now, you're not alone in this, right? This has been a common narrative across all the shared services leaders across the country, across the globe rather. Now, over here today, we want to challenge some of these very core assumptions about how enterprises operations should work. It is about challenging how real data starts taking consideration from the case studies that we've done, right? Likes of Daikin, likes of NEC, and a very practical framework what we can share at the end, which we can take back, which we can help you take back to the organization, right? And this is not very theory led. This is not at all in terms of heavy operations. This is very practitioner driven. So let me start a very important question with all the audiences over here. Um, if our BPO costs went up significantly last year, right, while the transaction volume stayed essentially flat, right, what do you think that was the bigger narrative, Utsa? That why are these costs going up, but the transaction volumes are remaining fairly flat?
Bang on, Omkar, I must say, because if you look at the BPO industry, right, or the entire shared services industry, I mean, it has its own share of the run. It's been there for the last, I think, almost 20 years. Phenomenal growth story, especially for Indian market. But if you look at this entire model, right, as a business model, it's fundamentally flawed, right? I would say because it provides you only a linear ability to grow and scale, right? And that's where the challenge is. The example that you gave, right? Every GCC leader is struggling that way. My costs are going up, which naturally will be, and this is where my productivity is not growing up, right? My costs are increasing. My ROI is continuously getting impacted over year on year. And what do I do with that? So that's where we realize that a model like this needs to have a much more needs to go through a complete transition, and that's what Supervity is doing at a certain level.
Yep. So, just to put into the perspective, right? Like, let me put some numbers on the table. The global BPO market currently valued at $328 billion today. But in just about half a decade more, it's going to be projected at approximately $700 billion, right? In about 7 to 8 years. And that's a staggering approximately what 9.9% compound annual growth rate. This is massive growth. But over
Yep.
here, this is the same question what nobody in the board meeting is asking that, hey, these are great numbers. It is definitely investment worthy. But is that growth really efficient, or it is just more of ways that, we're picking up a lot of people and we're putting them on the front lines or over here back lines, if you want to call that, more bodies, more seats, more invoices from vendors, more recruitment headaches, everything, right? It is just getting into a numbers game, right? But the question is that, is it really getting better when the numbers are growing in terms of volume? Do you really have to start putting a significant amount of bodies, or can we go ahead and increase that efficiency delta what goes out, right? For 20 years enterprises have followed this exact simple playbook, right? If the work is repetitive, ship it to the BPO. The logic was clearly labor arbitrage, right? You're moving it from where wages are lower. It worked for a quite significant amount of time. It actually propelled the Indian economy for about 20 to 25 years. It saved Fortune 500 billions of dollars, and it created an entire economy vertical by itself. But in 2026, what I really feel is that we've hit what I like to call the BPO ceiling, right? And now, I'm talking about the BPO ceiling, the model which worked for 2 decades had a structural flaw that it could not be optimized away. And again, nothing to blame them. This was pre-Gen AI era. The flaw was that BPO was a typical people scaling model. The output required more headcount. There's no economies of scale. Only it was economy of location, and that location advantage, honestly, I believe was eroding. Right, we had offshoring, then we had nearshoring. And honestly, with the kind of inflation globally, the global wages are rising everywhere, and that particular arbitrage, it is significantly shrinking. So, Utsa, what I want you to do is that if you can walk us through these hidden costs that make the model unsustainable, that, probably is bigger than what is showing up on the P&Ls of all these GCVs today, right? Because I honestly feel that you cannot optimize your way out of a structural problem, right? The ceiling is model itself. So, Utsa, can you walk us through that? What are these kind of hidden costs currently BPOs are suffering from, right? Shared services companies are suffering from, and that can be a great starting point ahead.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Omkar. So let me try to unpack these cost components, right, which appear and which they never appear on a BPO proposal when you're reviewing it, but when you're doing your final reconciliation or financial reconciliation, right, they appear, they end up showing as a operational reality, right? The way I would call them is absolutely invisible line items that you had no control on, right? And the first and the most important one of them is the what I call is attrition tax. Now, and I'm sure a lot of these GCC leaders must be completely, agreeing with us on this. I mean, in an industry like a GCC or a BPO, the reality of the life is that you're losing a third of the workflows every single year. And I am not even exaggerating. I mean, that's not an outlier, it's a norm. I mean, there are research papers which talk about it. I mean, which show that around 30 to 40% of annual attrition happens across BPO operations. In India, per se, I mean, this number is as high as 50%. Uh, you know, um, it's come down a little bit, but it's still most of the large call centers see at least 44% turnover of employees every year. Now think about that, right? That's like nearly half of your operational workflows or workforce almost gone. I mean, every year, right? And it's not just about people. Let's do the mathematics behind it, right? I mean, the average BPO agent's employee tenure runs for around 11 months. That's what the statistics say, right? So essentially, what you're doing is that you are essentially paying to retrain your entire operational team every year, and that is not even the, I mean, if you, and there's a direct cost to it and there's an indirect cost to it, right? So the first is when we look at every time an employee or a agent leaves, the cost to replace is something around 20%, and I'm talking about recruitment cost. There are training costs involved. There are issues when it comes of taking them to a certain level of productivity, right? There's a dip in quality when that person is leaving and before the new person joins in, and none of this is actually getting accounted in your spreadsheets, right? And uh, and and the other big challenge, right, and the bigger challenge that I see is that when this particular employee walks out of the door, right, your entire process knowledge walks out with them, right? The person who finally understood your exceptions, who understood your edge cases, your the quirks of your customer, right? There's a guy who knew that, okay, this one vendor X, who when they ship their invoices, always gets a pure number wrong, right? So you have to end up starting from right from the scratch when someone walks in and train them or make them learn all over again, right? So this is what I call is the biggest component, which is completely unaddressed is the attrition tax, right? The other part which I want to talk about, Omkar, here is that is the what we're calling it exception tax, right? And this is the one that really kills your ROI, right? I mean, the happy path we all know is cheap. It's predictable. It's standard work, right? These are standard transactions. Those processes are smooth, and they operate at the quoted rate because they've been thought through about it, right? Your vendor looks great. Your KPIs, your SLAs are all green. Everyone's happy. The challenge comes when the moment when something complex comes up, right? Say, for example, an unusual vendor invoice, a non-standard approval workflow mechanism, right? A regulatory change, or a new customer interaction or escalation, right? In a scenario like this, a couple of things might happen, right? One, one is that your hourly rate of handling that particular exception on that particular job goes up, right? Because it requires you to handle that exception in a very specialized way. And number two is that your quality collapses completely, right? Your internal team has to end up absorbing a lot of rework. Either way, you end up paying more. So 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 this is how we see, like, I mean, and this is our experience, right? We're working across multiple enterprises, and we've seen across industries. There are internal teams who are spending 20 to 30% of their time fixing exceptions, that they were supposed to be handled by the team itself, right? And that is the additional, I would say, the subsidy cost that you are paying for your in this entire business PPO model, right? And then the third part is the compliance part. Any operation needs to go through a certain level of quality. There's certain compliances, and managing these compliances across thousands of outsourced agents requires a tremendous amount of quality associates, right? QA managers, the way we call them. Now this sampling is done completely based on quality checks. There are audit preparations, the documentation, and all this work comes at a cost, which was never initially planned for. It was not accounted for in your operating budget, right? And 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 I said, right, when we spoke with when we keep talking to a lot of enterprises, and let me give you an example of one of the large financial services company that we managed, right? So they had a process which relied. heavily on a manual emails, right, to create those support queries, and something which we all have been pretty used to seeing in our working environment. So internal employees would send out emails to their respective teams, who would go out manually create those tickets in their support system. They used Helix system. Now this process was completely broken. It was not just time consuming; it was prone to errors. It absolutely lacked standardization, which hit their entire support operations. They had no visibility in terms of what is the true cost of handling an exception, right? Because at the end of the day, this operation was spread across multiple teams. It was spread across multiple budgets, right? So when you think of how you add it all up, right? And you see that the linear model is will never improve. The attrition that the challenge is that the attrition that it completely resets your knowledge base every year. The exceptions that spike cost, either the collapsing quality, the compliances are suffering, and you're not really optimizing your operations, right? It's like you've rented a treadmill, you're running on it every year after year, and the cost of and the treadmill is becoming more and more expensive, right? So that's the fundamental challenge that I have with the current model, is where the BPO as an industry, right, it's not working towards compounding the knowledge uh, that it's going through, right? It's leaking it, right? So this is what I see the key challenge is. Well, I've so let's have Omkar. I would have you cover the good part about it, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you take us through the alternative approach to how we can make this
Yeah.
better?
Great, lovely. You've made a lot of BPO leaders teary-eyed right now, Utsa. You know that, right? So, what we're going to do is, switch to a rosy picture, right? And
Yeah.
the idea is, again, I'm not such a big fan of buzzwords, but offshoring became a buzzword. That, oh, let's offshore our operations. And then when time zone started becoming a hurdle, there's something called nearshoring. But I think a natural evolution out of that is what we like to call the concept of an AI shoring, right? Now, this is what we think is the alternative, right? Let me introduce what we call AI shoring. And more importantly, let me show you how enterprises are actually achieving it, right? AI shoring is fundamentally different from traditional BPO because it does not operate on software economics. It operates on software economics. It does not operate on people economics. And let me explain what it means in practical terms, right? In a people scaling model, your marginal cost is very linear. Every additional transactions requires proportionally more human effort. If you want to process 20% more invoices, well, you roughly require 20% more people. It's a very input output kind of a model. There is no leverage per se. But in a software scaling model, right, your upfront costs are much higher. The AI needs to learn your practices, your exceptions, your workflows. But again, I wouldn't want to recorrect myself. I wouldn't call it cost. I would call it one of the best investments. But how does one does it, right? The marginal cost approaches to zero as more and more data, as more and more volume starts getting serviced, right? I want to introduce the word over here called AI employee. An AI employee does not need that overtime for the month end close. It does not take vacation during your busiest quarter. It does not leave for a competitor after you've invested training in it, right? So the whole idea is that it has to go from people scaling to something which is an AI employee first scaling, right? Now, what I want to do is I don't want to just talk theory, right? Let me show you real enterprises, right? You talked about Daikin, right? Global leaders in HVAC. They deployed an AI employee for their financial shared services, invoice processing, bank reconciliation, month end close. And the numbers just were fantastic, right? So let me just pull this case study, right? Now, what happened was 92% of manual data entry was completely taken care of. There's 90% reduction in invoice processing turnaround time. About 1,000 staff hours were saved every single month. And this is not a pilot project, right? That's production scale running today. As we speak, invoices are getting went ahead, right? Another example, different industry. There was a large Japanese enterprises which wanted to support their channel partners, right? Product information was fragmented across various systems. Channel support was slow, manual. Even to generate quotes, it was fairly inefficient and fairly slow, right? So now what we did was we deployed these AI sales agent, trained on their complex product manuals and configurations, and the results started speaking for themselves, right? There was 40% faster response rate, three times the productivity, 70% reduction in channel service cost, and all this was critical, right? 100% accuracy and no data entry, right? Zero data entry errors, zero. Now, there's this whole idea about, these case studies have common beyond the typical numbers is that the memory fabric, right? So when you mentioned about, you know, when somebody leaves, and this is a very important topic for us, is when somebody leaves your organization, it leaves with a lot of knowledge what it has, right? We're talking about tacit knowledge leaving the organization. We're also talking about, loss on investment on the training. Every time they're managing any kind of an exception, that is an increase in the tacit knowledge what they have. Every policy which got updated because of their insights, every correction which was made, right? This was a challenge when somebody walks out. But when we are talking about AI employees, they don't churn, right? They don't forget their training. Every exception what they've handled, they have been able to you know get their policy updated. Every exception is reinforcing their basic learnings over here. It is instantly absorbed. It doesn't even have a lot of ramp up time, and it's applied permanently across all transactions, right? Another example is one of India's leading bank. I think what we did was that we ended up deploying AI agents for their email to ticket automation and on their MS Teams chatbot. They saw significant reduction in ticket creation time. They saw higher percentage of emails being handled automatically, the faster resolution time, your L1 ticket resolution, L2 ticket resolution went down. And the bigger win over here was actually consistency, because every interaction followed the same exact process, right? It was very deterministic in nature about what exactly would the resolution be provided, right? The best part over here was every exception was also documented, and with this exceptions being documented, the knowledge started compounding. Now, I want to pause over here with a very important thought, right? That this is not like early adopter territory anymore, right? This is not people who are just trying to experiment with AI, and whatever results they get out of it, they are feeling the best out of it, right? Like, okay, we're gonna throw some dollar money at it, and if it works, great, right? We're gonna show it to our board that, oh, we experimented with AI. I think that's become yesteryear, right? We're talking today. You know, Gartner is predicting about 40% of enterprise applications will integrate all these AI agents by end of 2026, right? It's less than 5% today. That's an 8x increase in one single year. Again, some beautiful data what I have, right? 72% of enterprises are actively investing in AI agent development. More than 90% of IT leaders are introducing end-to-end autonomous agents within their 2 years. We are talking to customers every day, right? We're talking to customers across the globe, right? We're talking to prospects across the globe. And the kind of enthusiasm towards, investing in AI, no longer as an experiment that if it flies, great. If it not, we'll do it in the spirit of experimentation. I think it's gone, right? People have such core belief systems now embedded into the AI system that yes, this is where we're going to put the money in. This is the kind of ROI what we expect, right? So over here, when we are talking about this, one very critical element is how does human engage with these kind of systems? Utsa, I would request you if you could walk us through this entire architecture which makes this possible, right? And also where enterprises get it wrong when we're talking about human and AI collaboration model, about how AI employees and current humans can, coexist, and the efficiency can go at 100x level, right? So Utsa, if you can just get us acquainted with what is this human in command architecture, and how does a platform like Supervity is able to propel this kind of behavior for coexisting and co-maximizing productivity of humans and AI.
So here's where we see a lot of enterprises getting stuck, right? They adopt AI, but they adopt it wrong, I would say, right? And the biggest mistake that they do has a very, very specific name. It's a very popular name. And everyone's going to smile when we talk about it, right? It's the human in the loop. Now, human in the loop sounds safe, it sounds responsible, it sounds good governance, all the keywords which the world everyone's talking about in this world, right? You deploy AI. The, the thing is that you deploy an AI, but a human has to review every output that goes through it. Right? No one can accuse of being reckless. The problem is that it becomes a trap. I mean, uh, you know, if and there are three ways I can think of it. Right, one is the bottleneck problem. So if a human has to review every output that the AI is creating, then the process is going to move at the speed of the human, and you have not scaled anything. What you have done is you've only digitized the queue, right? Essentially, think of it like you've got a faster engine to your car, but the car still has to stop at every red light, right? Second is again the fatigue problem, which comes with every process which is driven by or looked at upon by a human, right? And we know humans are not great at doing this kind of a vigilance work. I mean, it is natural that after approving 50 flawless invoices, there will be a miss. Right? There will be an error at the 51st one, right? And it's not a training problem. It is not a human problem. It is as simple as it's plain simple biology. I mean, our brains are not designed to sustain that kind of attention and something on a very very repetitive task, right? So uh, and the third that I think of it, and the big is that the whole dead loop problem, right? So when a human catches an error, and fixes it, the challenge is that correction never comes back to the system again. The AI keeps making the same mistake tomorrow, and then the day after, and you are stuck in a loop that's never improvising, right? So the challenge is that you have built a system that cannot learn, right? So the alternative to that is what we have coined the term called human in command, right? And this is how Supervati is fundamentally different at an architecture level, right? And let me talk you through this whole three-tier. I would call it more. I mean, I'll call a cognitive architecture, right, of Supervati's AI employee, right, and something that we have been deployed at scale across enterprises, right. Now, at the core of it, or at the top of it, it's the command center. Now, this is the human AI interface layer. This is where humans and AI interact. They're learning from each other. This is where governance happens. It provides transparency and control. It enables the human to approve, to give feedback to the AI, right? It helps us to monitor SLAs, your compliance, your entire audit logs, and the agent performance, right? And this you can do, and using a command center you can do this across your entire AI workforce, right? And the most important thing is that it provides you a continuous improvement loop. Every correction, right, every approval, every exception that has been handled is fed back into the system, making it smarter, right? And this is how, where we say that knowledge is compounded, right? It's not leaking, it's compounding, right? So that's the role of the command center. Then the tier two comes is the orchestrator agents. Now think of them as like cognitive managers. These are the guys who understand your business goals. They can break down those tasks into subtasks. They can delegate. Right? They delegate the work to specialized operator agents, depending on how the situation is. Right? They mean, and I mean, I'll go a little technical here, but and it's important to understand that because these orchestrator agents maintain both a long-term memory and a short-term memory, right? And it can do across executions, right? So because it's important for them to not lose the context between different transactions, right? And most importantly, these orchestrator agents understand from what is human feedback is, right? Unlike any static workflow tool that is essentially just following a script, orchestrators are creating plans dynamically, right? Based on the reasoning, based on the learning, right? They adapt to what's happening, and it's not just pre-programmed, right? So they're very very dynamic in that way. And the third layer is the operator agents, right? Think of them as your intelligent knowledge workers, right? They are essentially self-controlled, self-contained units capable of both reasoning and execution. They can perform tasks. They can do stuff like invoice processing, manage compliances, do vendor onboarding, do parts of payroll validation, and multiple such operations, right? They can also essentially access your enterprise applications like SAPs, Oracle, Salesforce of the world, and any other applications, right? And each of these operator agent maintains a task level memory, which is important because it needs to be traceable, it needs to be auditable, right? The key difference that I see that we have from a traditional workflow tool is that these traditional automation tools automate how the work is done. Essentially, they look at clicks and triggers and API calls, whereas a technology like Supervity, right, it automates who is doing the work. Workflow tools give you task automation, and you know, technology like Supervity gives you, I would call it cognitive automation, right? It is a multi-agentic architecture which can act, which can plan, which can learn, and it can adapt, right? So this is how Supervity is different now. And also a very important part here is that especially when you're looking at your adoption cycle in enterprises, right? So we're not looking at Supervity to replace any of your existing, these AI employees work with your existing applications, right? Nobody, I mean, we understand that nobody has time to rip out your existing systems. No one has the budget to do it. It is only about creating orchestrating, or I would say creating an intelligence layer on top of your current system of records, right? So coming back, right? So here's how we see is the critical difference with a technology like Supervity. When a human handles an exception, the system learns, the policy is updated, the AI employee evolves, right? So essentially, you're not babysitting, like you're in a much commanding position. The human role, I mean, moves transitions away from being a completely data approver to a more like a process commander, right? And that's what the role of a human should be, which is about creating, giving strategic directions to AI, and handling only truly complex exceptions, right, where certain decision needs to be taken, right? Otherwise, they can just sit back, relax, and watch the system get smarter with every single day, right? So that's how it is, right? And how do you get a to how can you get a technology like this in your organization, right? I will have it, Onkar, talk about that as well, uh, right? Onkar, can you just run us through how can we have this AI employee work in an enterprise?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So thank you so much for opening up our super witty box to the whole world. I think in a lot of ways, this is an industry first. But again, this might look all bells and whistles on the slide, but I want to spend the last few minutes on how do we actually operationalize it. What's the kind of modus operandi we can start putting if we really want to see AI employees in action at our workforce, right? So this sounds a lot about, you know, experimentation stage, right? But when we want to get those experiments in real enterprise environment, right, how do we actually do that, right? This is a common narrative that, okay, Omkar, Utsa, this sounds compelling, the case studies are impressive, but I have existing BPO contracts, I have ERP implementations in progress, I have a change management backlog that's already overwhelming. Yeah, you can't just flip a switch, right? And all the time my answer is that, you're right, you do not have to flip a switch. This is not a forklift upgrade, right? You also don't need to rip out your ERP or terminate your contracts overnight. Here is what we are seeing when we are working with enterprises to make this transition, or I would rather not even use the word transition, I would say upgrade or evolution, very successful, right? What we do is that we first identify highest friction, highest attrition processes, right? These are your highest ROI targets as well. You look at any kind of a cycle, right? You're looking at procure to pay cycle. We're looking at employee onboarding. We're looking at accounts payable. We're looking at claims processing, customer service ticket handling, right? All these processes, you're already, seeing what Utsav beautifully mentioned, your exception tax, where internal team is absorbing rework from an outsourced team. And that's where the hidden cost is the highest, and that's where the win is the most visible. Second is, we got to start measuring what's the real cost, right? It's not just the hourly rate of the BPO contract. That number is absolutely misleading, right? There's a hidden burden on it, right? The exceptions that bounce back, the compliance is overhead, the knowledge walks out, right? The internal team has spent a lot of time during the day doing quality checks, the rework, the escalation, the audit preparation. And most of the time, these enterprises find their true cost to be 40 to 60% higher than the contracted rate. And when you see the real number, right, the business case for having an AI employee writes itself. Now, the third and the most important is that pilot fast, right? You a lot of large, I don't want to name them, but a lot of large consulting firms who are trying to deploy AI employees, they spend a lot of time building POCs, right? You have 6 months proof of concept with steering committees, monthly reviews, you know, a rapid pilot. Our approach is to prove that the hardest part of the workflow first, right? The exceptions, the edge cases, the things that will break in traditional automation in 30 days or less, right? If we can handle your exceptions, we can definitely handle your standard work, right? And that's the test. So here's is where we always like to see that, how can we have your first AI employee in 6 weeks? And let me give you a very practical timeline on what we call the AI shoring journey, right? 6 weeks, very tight. First 2 weeks, process discovery. We'll identify high value automation opportunities across your shared services using what we have developed, a beautiful, beautiful discovery, AI discovery tool, which is a show and tell AI discovery tool. We'll do an entire process discovery of it. Week 2 and 3, we will have a blueprint of the agentic workflows. We design, intelligent workflows which will connect all these AI agents with existing systems. Work 3 weeks, 3 to 5, we'll deploy an MVP agent, or rather an AI employee, which will become the initial AI workforce, which will go live with human oversight for continuous learning. The last week or so is that we'll activate service level governance, a command center metrics which kicks in to ensure that performance is there, accountability is there, and then gradually we'll scale it across all the functions, right? Where successful AI models are working at one particular thing, we just replicate it, right? So first AI employee operational in 6 weeks, you scale it across functions by 12 weeks, right? And that's not a promise only, but that's a kind of a pattern what we've observed, right? And we've got some fantastic use cases to testify it, right? So just to conclude, right? Here's the kind of reality check that should really sharpen everyone's thinking who's over here. Right? McKinsey shows that 89% of people are still operating with industrial age operation models, right? There's hierarchies, there's manual handoffs, there is people scaling. Only 1% have actually made the shift what they think is a decentralized network model, which can the AI enable. Now, this is the opportunity which is sitting right in front of all the shared services leader, right? 72% of enterprises will plan to deploy AI agents by the end of this year. 93% of them are already introducing autonomous systems. Now, the opportunity is that you can have a 12-month head start with your competitors, or you're just going to play catch up with the models what they are planning to deploy in terms of human in command, in terms of AI employee workforce. So to conclude, our message is very simple. We got to stop optimizing a broken model. We got to stop negotiating for better rates on the treadmill that gets more expensive every year. We have to start gradually evolving it. The metrics of success is completely shifted. It's not about headcount management anymore. It is all about intelligence orchestration. It's about creating an ecosystem where an AI employee can coexist with an agent, which can, even if the business increases, even if the volumes of transactions increase, the shared services should be able to support with the same set of people. So, you know Utsa, this has been fantastic. I think the the era of BPOs has become entered 2.0, if I'm not wrong. Your 1.0 was all about labor arbitrage and upskilling an entire generation of people in low wage countries so that they can support. I think BPO 2.0 is going to be placing an AI employee in every tower so that most towers can work autonomously. Businesses can scale without increasing their reliance on headcount management, on developing this huge infra cost, huge replacement cost, huge training cost. I think this is where we are heading, right? So, what's up? Any final thoughts before we conclude? Yeah, Utsa, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, can you is it? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want very powerful ending notes. I think you're on mute.
Correct. No, my thoughts was that I think the shift in the business model from people scaling to software scaling, it's not that it's coming. I think it's already here, right? And the enterprises that are moving now will not just cut cost, but they will create, rather, they will build a compounding long-term sustainable advantage, and that's something that's going to keep widening quarter on quarter, right? And like I said, you have to stop renting the treadmill, and you have to start building the machine. So, with that note, I would just like to end it here.
Okay, brilliant. So again, thank you everybody for joining in. I think this was a great webinar to introduce what the future of shared services is going to be looking like. There's going to be a series of such very vertical, tower specific, about what can be done at an accounts payable level, at procurement level, at all across. So the idea is that this is a new model, right? And we have to be completely transparent. We believe what we've built is working with the shared services of the companies what we're working with. Still, this is an ongoing innovation process. Design partners who have helped us to crack this entire process so that we can confidently come here and I wouldn't say the word preach, but share our best practices. I think this opens up avenues for all Fortune 500 companies to really think about where should they start having their shared services operations and how they can start inculcating AI employees. So that is up from our side. We are Team Supervity. It was a delight to host all of you on this webinar today. And I hope this takes away a very important message to all of you of building AI employee capabilities within the towers of your shared services, of your BPO. Thank you, everybody. Have a great, great weekend ahead.